Today we are building a rustic Barnwood feel table completely out of pine construction lumber. I'm going to show you how to get an authentic, organic texture quickly and easily, as well as all the products we use to stain, protect, and assemble this massive 10-foot table. So if you're ready, just keep watching. Alright, we started with 3 10-foot 2x10s edge joined together. I don't have any footage of when we did this, but it's pretty straightforward. We essentially tried to find the straightest pieces we could at the lumber store, and then we ripped the joining edges down on our table saw and glued the whole thing together with wood glue and a bunch of clamps. We tried to make it so the top side was as close to flat and level as we could get it. I'll link a more in-depth video down below on how to do this if you're curious, or you could also just pick up a pre-joined slab at your local lumber store. As long as you have something that's softwood in your desired size and shape, you're good to go. To create texture, we're going to take a steel wire wheel and use it to grind against the edge of the table and anywhere else we want an organic look. This takes advantage of the wood's natural layers, some of which are harder than others. So what we're doing is essentially grinding out all the softest parts of the plank and leaving just the most stable and durable wood behind. This is actually exactly what happens to barnwood and other wood that is exposed to the elements for many years. Also, the wood really tells you where to go. Just hold the wire wheel where the wood's natural color variations are, and you'll see part of the wood come away and part of it stay behind. It's a really cool process. We are using a pneumatic tool hooked up to our air compressor, but you can also use this wire wheel in an electric drill. And as always, I'll be linking everything we use down below. In addition to the wheel, you can also use an axe to shave off some bigger sections or create a hand-hewn detail with nicks along the wood surface. We concentrated most of our texture on the edges of the table and then did a bit of highlighting along any big knots in the surface. Try not to go too overboard on the top, especially if you're going to use this table for eating or working. Once we're happy with the texture, it was time to do a bit of refinement. I started by filling any gaps between our joined planks with a stainable wood filler. This will help us get a nice level surface with no ridges where those planks meet. Once that's dry, I'm going to use an orbital sander with a medium grit on the top to smooth away any excess and also smooth away any other major issues so we have a nice level surface where the table will actually be used. Along the sides, I used my Surf Prep sander with a medium grit foam pad. This helps smooth out any flakes or splintery sections while still curving around the texture that we created so it doesn't actually sand any of it down. Okay, our tabletop is ready, so now let's talk about the legs. These also got built off camera, but they're very simple and also made out of basic pine and textured in the exact same way. We have a 4x4 post under each corner, and then 2 2x4s making a decorative X, and they're joined to the 4x4s with just a couple pocket screws. We also added a faux dowel accent in the middle that's entirely decorative. We drilled a hole into the outside of the X with a 1-inch spade, and then we glued a small piece of dowel right into the hole. This part's optional, but it was a quick and simple way to give a good impression of some aged structural joinery. These legs got the same treatment as our tabletop, but because it's not an eating or writing surface, we're going to be able to go a bit more intense. We put some big grooves and crevices to make these look super worn and authentic. I used the Surf Prep foam sander again on them to make sure that there are no loose pieces of wood or anything you might catch yourself on. Okay, our wood is prepped and ready to go, so it's time to get to staining. I'm using my all-time favorite color, Early American by Varathane. I'm spreading it on with a chip brush and letting the stain soak right into those nooks and crannies. I did 1 coat on every surface, and then I came back for a second coat on the top of the table as well as along the outside edge of the legs, just to make sure I had a nice, deep and even color. We also decided last minute, because our table is so long, that we wanted to add a couple braces to run along the back of the table where the table is going to be against a wall. These are simple 2x4s with a bit of texture, and don't worry too much about them now. You'll see how they play into the final assembly in just a bit. I left everything to dry overnight, and now it's time to seal. We are using oil-based polyurethane today, which is not the norm on my channel, but for this project it will be well worth the effort. Typically, people use water-based poly because it's non-yellowing and easier to work with because you can clean it up with simple soap and water. I've used water-based poly plenty of times in the past with good success on other furniture projects, but for high-traffic surfaces like dinner tables, oil-based poly is honestly a requirement in my mind. It's just way more durable. For cleanup, you're going to need some mineral spirits to clean off your brush between each coat, and also be sure to keep some shop towels nearby for a nice clean working area. I chose a satin sheen, but feel free to go more heavy on the gloss if that's your preference. And we're going to apply it in the exact same way as regular water-based poly. So putting it on in sections, smoothing over our work, and not going back to touch it after that. I'm working each one of our 3 planks on its own, keeping a wet edge down the length so I could get a smooth line from one end to the other. I'm also conscious to clean up any drips or excess that are rolling over the edge. The legs both got 2 coats, and for the table stop, I'm starting on the back of the table with 1 coat, and then I'll flip it over and do a total of 3 coats on the top, waiting an entire 24 hours between coats. If you want a true flawless finish, it's important to take some sandpaper, this is 400 grit, and gently buff out any blemishes or imperfections between coats. This will help get rid of any stray drips or puddles or marks from stray brush strokes. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to take a tack cloth to wipe up any dust and then get started on my second coat. Again, waiting a full overnight so this cures really well. Also, keep in mind that poly can help smooth out any areas that are super textured. So if you have any big gouges in your tabletop or super rough pieces along the edge that you're worried you might scratch yourself on, try building up some poly in that area and it'll help seal it down, if that makes sense, almost like a resin. After the third coat though, you do not want to use sandpaper. But there is a trick. If you still have any imperfections or weird spots, you can actually use a brown paper lunch bag to buff and polish the surface into a perfect shine. Once you're happy with your staining and your sealing, it is time to assemble. Here you can see how we use those stretcher pieces to create a back for our table, which is going to go against a wall. We used some wood pieces as props to get everything level and then screwed them in using pocket screws. One stretcher is about 10 inches off the floor and the other one sits right under the tabletop to add a bit more support, just because our table is really long at 10 feet. Also, because ours is so big, we actually had to move it into place in pieces, so I don't show here how to assemble the top, but you just need to put it in place and then use small L brackets to screw the legs into the top from underneath. And our table is looking really good now, so let's roll that reveal. This table is absolutely massive and full of texture. The surface is a really nice, rich brown. It's smooth, easy to work and write on, and really well protected by all those layers of poly. The edge has that perfect weathered look that accentuates the organic structure of the wood. The legs have even more texture, like they're built of hand-hewn beams. This table turned out just as I pictured, and better yet, this texturing technique we used was so simple and effective that I'm planning to use it again in future projects. It's a great new addition to my tool belt. I hope it is for yours too. Let me know in the comments down below if there's something I could have done differently or better. I am always open to improvements. Otherwise, thanks for watching and I'll catch you next time.